Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast sponsored by Applied Software. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. My guest today is Phil Keeney. He is a strategic thinker who has spent his career delivering technical strategies for businesses. Phil is the managing director of technology solutions at Stand By Ness. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Hey, thanks, Todd. I appreciate it.
So would love to start by kind of picking your brain around some high-level trends happening with cybersecurity.
Sounds good. It's certainly a hot topic for sure. We hear about this, the cybersecurity stuff every day in the news. There's somebody's getting hit at some point. And, I would say probably the single biggest trend that's gaining traction has certainly accelerated the shift in cloud technologies and the associated security systems. And of course, as we all know, that's COVID. When COVID hits, organizations that may have had, 10 locations, now they could be 300 locations. Right. And what I mean by that is now all their employees are working from their home. So instead of 300 employees being in an office, in 5 of those offices, now they're working from home. Mm-hmm. So then in question comes, how do we secure all those end users are now connecting from their home networks. Right. And if we don't have hardware to deploy to them, they're using home PCs, and those home PCs 9 times out of 10 don't meet the compliance or the security requirements that the organization may have. Mm. So, when you look at the trends there, cloud technologies has certainly been a huge adopter here. And of course, COVID accelerated that. Typically, historically, most companies have viewed security primarily as an IT matter. Mm. And I would say just due to the higher frequency of breaches, there's more recognizable names becoming targets. C-levels and board members alike are now, they're becoming more active in the risk-making decisions as it revolves around cybersecurity. It's no longer, the folks at your organization or my organization saying, well, I think, this is what we need to put in place, policies, procedures. No, you know what? It's coming up, rolling up the leadership just from a risk and, exposure to the outside and the clients that they serve.
Yeah. Interesting. So over the last year, you've really seen that C-suite just kind of take more ownership of it or just more interest in it?
I would say ownership, because at the end of the day, in the event that there is a breach, it's not just the data side that needs to be tangled with, but it's also then the market exposure. How do you remedy? How do you come back from, a massive breach that takes your organization down? Because again, it's not just your data that you're protecting anymore. You're protecting all your clients' data that you filter through as well that comes into your system. So those are things that the top, C-levels, leadership are taking into consideration as well. And it's nothing new, but I think through the light of a lot of stuff that's been happening in the market here, leadership board members are definitely taking a stronger approach into understanding how cybersecurity is being managed and the risks, what they're putting in place to limit those risks applied to each organization.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So what then are some practical steps or policies that firms should look at implementing around cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, that could certainly be a loaded question, but I always, my approach for every organization, because at the end of the day, you can have someone out there that's trying to, you can implement millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, whatever dollar amount you want to apply to it from a cybersecurity perspective. There's so many tool sets out there. There's so much that you can spend on this front. Mm-hmm. But so what organizations need to take a look at is from a common sense approach. The comment that you made there, what are practical steps? Okay, there's a lot of impractical steps that you can take that just don't make sense from a fiduciary financial perspective, but what makes sense? Secure the perimeter, but also build resiliency. And what I mean by that is take a look at your budget, understand your risks, not only to yourself, but to your clients. And say, okay, you know what? Here's what we can allocate from a spend perspective to secure our perimeter. Build the firewalls, build the connections, put the MFA tool sets in place, all these things, because hey, the more you put in place, the more somebody has to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Put the appropriate tool sets in place, the individuals in place, and then build a resiliency plan. Because as we know, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if. So if you become, if your infrastructure becomes breached, if your business is breached, how do you bounce back from that? That's it, that resilience piece of it.
Right.
And that's making sure you have a solid disaster recovery plan in place. That's tested. So many people throw a disaster recovery plan in place, and does it work? Well, I don't know. What is your uptime? What is your downtime in the event that you are breached? So ensure that there's updated cybersecurity policies in place as well as another one. So many people have their professional liability policy and they make the assumption, hey, this is going to cover it. Add the cybersecurity liability policy with it. This adds additional coverage. So make sure you reach out to your provider and take a look at that. But building that perimeter, creating that resiliency would definitely reduce your risk and give not only yourself, leadership, the organization, your client base, a peace of mind saying, hey, this organization's got their stuff together.
Yeah. And I imagine it's one thing to bounce back. That's great, but it's also the speed in which you bounce back that matters.
Oh, 100%, Todd. And that's just it. And that's every organization should go through the process of, because again, we work with organizations across the globe. Every organization, their tolerance level for being down is different. Every organization, when you first out of the gate say, well, how long can you be down? Well, I can't be down at all. I've got to be up and running all the time, especially in the AEC world.
Right.
If people aren't working, guess what? That's billable time that you got people sitting around that they're not billed at 90, 95, 125 bucks an hour. They're dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the resiliency plan there, yeah, they need to be operating at full capacity all the time. So their bounce back plan, their disaster recovery plan has to be solid. But again, I go into some other organizations and they make that same comment and say, we can't have downtime. Great, fantastic. We'll build the solution that will create that. And then when you present that solution, it's like, well, we can't afford that. That's just too much. And then they truly, and again, it's peeling back the onion.
Sure.
They sit back and they say, okay, what is economical? What can we afford? If we're going to spend $20,000 a year in IT cybersecurity to have that resiliency, that backup plan, but our downtime for 10 hours out of the course or 24 hours out of the course of the year may be $8,000. So that's where that happy medium, that balance is, well, I can afford to be down for 24 hours because it's going to cost me $8,000 versus spending 20 for the year. And again, those are things that each organization needs to evaluate on their own. And another one there, you had asked the practical steps and policies. I mean, my goodness, I always tell people if it weren't for the mouse in their hand, the little clicker in their hand, we wouldn't be having half of these. But it's because people become click happy. And guess what? It comes through email phishing.
Yeah.
Email phishing accounts, so the attacks on accounts account for approximately 90% of all breaches within any given organization. And that's because people, they're in it every single day in their email, even on their mobile devices. It's harder for them to view a full email or where or who it's coming from on a mobile device. So they're at the end of the day, they pop open their phone or whatever it may be, look at it, and they start clicking links. And then that just opens up for disaster. Yeah. So make sure that the end users are trained. And that as simple as it sounds, it's common sense. Make sure that you're using some sort of tool set to train your employees what to look for, and create gamification out of it. Create something enjoyable out of it. That hey, if you pass and you get this score, you get something from you get a gift card or something along those lines. Because at the end of the day, you've got to make it where the employee is going to do it, not just click, throw it just for the sake of doing it. They have to understand and digest it.
Right. Yeah, we have that at Applied where you can report the phishing, and when you do it, you get it right. It has this big congratulations thing that comes up, and that for this freakishly competitive person, I love seeing that congratulations screen come up. That's my game for it. Yes, I got it. Some of them are getting really good.
And I know a lot of organizations, they create a game out of it. where that you can actually log in and you can see where you stand compared to everybody else based upon there's training and so on that you could do within the portal, again, depending upon the software you use, if it's Know-Before, if it's Iron Scales or something along those lines. There's training modules inside of it. So again, like anything else, we all have kids. Well, I wouldn't say we have kids. You have kids. I have kids. You got to train them. It's that repetitive motion to get them in the mindset of what to do. Got to do the same thing for us adults too. The older we get, we tend to slip a little more. So that more frequent repetitiveness certainly helps out.
Yeah. Nice. Well, relating to the AEC industry, are there any other kind of particular risk with cybersecurity that maybe other industries may not have?
My comment to that off the cusp is no. And the reason I say that is hackers, or, as we call them, spies. And the reason we call them spies is because they don't just get in and hack and leave. A lot of times organizations are in, hackers are in or spies, they're in your infrastructure for, could be days, months, or years. So they're in there spying. So we call them spies.
Yeah.
But they don't, they don't just target, they don't just say, well, we're going to go after this firm or this specific sector. For an example, you see what happened recently on the Microsoft side, and even the, with FireEye and some of the other ones there, with their tool sets getting hacked. It's not specific targets per se in any one industry. Okay, I would say they're agnostic. They're unbiased. They're unbiased in their approach, and of course, some industries may have a larger target on their backs, but generally speaking, every industry in every business should take cybersecurity serious. We Stanball Ness, we have our IT division. We're in the managed services space. So when you say about the AEC industry, are there any particular risks with cybersecurity compared to other industries? Hackers or spies may want to target an MSP. And the reason being is because we actually have access to, our tool sets have access to, could be over 10,000 devices. So why would they want to try to target individual businesses when they could just target a managed service provider? Mm-hmm. Now they breach the entire organization. They have access to all their clients. Mm-hmm. But again, in the AEC industry, I wouldn't say there's any specific software programs or parameters that would particularly make them a prime target. Now, I will say that there are AEC firms in tandem with many other firms that will have a target on, or will have a target on their back as they start playing in, or maybe they already do, in the Department of Defense, the DoD space, governmental, federal Department of Defense space. Mm-hmm. Because if you hear about the terminology CMMC and what that means, these organizations that play in this space will be targets because they hold sensitive data. It's called CUI. So they hold sensitive data that someone like Russia, China, there's third world entities, nation states could want to access for the detriment of the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So you bring up CMMC. Can you unpack that? What does that really mean?
Yeah, and in an IT world, I mean, we like to throw around a lot of acronyms, but it's just when my wife, she works in the medical field, and she comes home and throws around all these medical terms, and she'll do it jokingly. I talk about the IT front, and she'll just start throwing out medical acronyms. I'm like, all right, I get it. I'll stop.
Right.
But CMMC, it stands for Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification.
Okay.
And historically, if businesses wanted to work with the DoD, they would do what they call self-certification or self-testing. Mm-hmm. And they would fill out a questionnaire that included 110 controls as part of NIST Special Publication 800-171. And because so many businesses were not following the NIST requirements as they should have been, businesses, and just a statistic here quick, businesses that would have to fill out and complete the NIST 800-171 to bid on those contracts, those government contracts, estimated only approximately 39% on average completed a portion of those 110 controls. So the DoD said, look, you know what? There are no hardcore checks and balances in place to validate for sure these organizations are fulfilling what we require of them to bid on our contracts. So that's why this new framework has rolled out. It's called CMMC, which will have checks and balances. And plain and simple, if you don't align, you don't get the contracts. It's cut and dry, black and white. And I like to tell people, you know, it's just like a SOC audit or one of the audits the manufacturers have to go through an ISO audit or something along those lines, that somebody comes in and you will be audited. So there's a certification, an audit process, a certification process. And one of the big things for folks in the AEC space, and I've had many, many conversations over the course of over 2020, because 2020, January of 2020 is when they started the initial rollout and the conversations. What's it going to look like? And I think it was October timeframe of 2020 when he really started to say, okay, you know what? Now we're going to start going through and have folks going through becoming certifiers. And what they're called C3 PAOs. And those are the third-party assessors. They're going to come in. So what's going to happen is an organization will bid on a contract. On that contract, it may or may not, depending upon whether or not it handles CUI, but it may or may not have line items on there saying this, or you, in order to bid on this contract, you need to adhere to CMMC level 1, level 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. If you're not adhering to those, you cannot bid on that contract. If you are deciding to bid on those contracts and you are in the process of becoming compliant, it's a pretty stringent process to become compliant, but you will have an auditor come through. They will tear you apart. From what we understand is there's not an organization out there that's going to pass the first time, or else the auditor's not doing his job. They'll find something. Hopefully it's something small that you can remediate within 60 to 90 days. And then after that, if you pass, then you're able to get the certificate. And here's the key for these organizations. And again, these are not new conversations we've been having with customers. I look at it as an opportunity. Okay. You think about hard trends, soft trends in the industry. What's happening? Okay. You try to follow the market. Focus on the hard trends. We know cybersecurity isn't going away. Our world is becoming more and more connected every day. You look at the apps that keep coming out. Apps are out frequently. I say, what is that saying? There's an app for everything, which is true. Somebody thinks that, we're missing this. I'll create an app for it. Are they secured? Who knows? You don't even know who the developer is half the time.
Right.
But what's going to happen is those organizations, as they walk through that process, they're going to have to clearly delineate where CUI is being housed, how it's being handled, who touches it. And again, that'll all be all of that will be part of that audit process. So it's going to be a heavy lift. But one of the things that I've been telling people is this for the majority of NIST 800-171 and CMMC, it's kind of basic cyber hygiene. You're not only protecting your own data and your employees, your PII and PHI and all that kind of good stuff, but you're also protecting your client's data that passes through your infrastructure, gets stored in email or wherever else it may get stored, servers, depending upon if you have drawings. So keep that in mind as organizations are thinking about the lift here for CMMC. You should have a pretty solid foundation already that aligns with NIST, but shamefully, a lot of people don't, which is why the DoD is forcing this down now, because there's so many breaches that have happened and Russia has taken billions of dollars worth of confidential information from us. Yeah.
Well, what kind of time commitment should firms kind of map out if they want to go and obtain a CMMC?
Good question. And again, we get that question quite frequently. As we look at CMMC, now keep in mind, CMMC is new. Okay. So people are asking, well, what does it look like? What's the certification process look like? What can I expect? My comment is, well, I can give you theoretically what I would envision and for what we know from the accreditation board, but nobody knows.
Yeah.
Because nobody's been audited yet. Nobody's been certified yet. So it's brand new, but from a process perspective, we've done quite a few what we call CMMC readiness assessments, where we come in from a compliance and security perspective, and we evaluate the organization's infrastructure against the current framework that has been added on, which is CMMC, that's been added on top of NIST 800-171. And we evaluate their infrastructure against those criteria or that framework. As from a timing perspective for CMMC readiness assessment, we typically are about 2 to 3 months. Again, how large is the organization? And here are some things that need to be considered. And we're working right now. So I'll give you a good example. We're working now with it's an engineering firm. They're about, give or take, 500 employees. They obtained a contract, a sizable contract, multi-million-dollar contract, multi-year contract, and somebody bid on it. And then it kind of rolls up to IT and there's no crap moment. Whoa, no, wait a minute here. We're not sure if we're equipped to handle the requirements as part of this RFP. And as we dug a little bit deeper, we chose that, hey, you know what? The best solution for the client is to completely separate their current infrastructure, keep the current infrastructure the same. Just think about you guys, Applied Software. Say you went out and bid on a contract, you won it, and it says, hey, you need to be CMMC level 3 compliant, and you need to validate that. All right. And you say, man, we can't change up our entire corporate infrastructure just to comply. So another scenario is to take this entire environment that's going to consist of CUI, and CUI, what that is controlled, unclassified information. So if you obtain drawings of a military base, if you obtain, say for an example, you're making a spring for a tank, you're going to obtain drawings on how to, specifications, specs on how to make that.
Right.
Through CMMC, machining, or whatever it may be. That's CUI. All right. When that stuff comes through, we need to figure out, okay, how do we separate from our corporate infrastructure? So what we're going to do is we're going to take everything relating to this project, just spin it out into a completely separate environment. It's not even going to touch our corporate network. That in itself makes everybody's life a lot easier, because when you ask about the lift, what's involved, we do have some organizations that they're in the manufacturing space. Their entire organization, everyone in there touches some portion of CUI. So that means that entire organization, their ERP system touches it. Their entire network, firewalls, every individual touches a portion of that CUI, that project, that RFP that comes through. So that at that point, from a lift perspective, we need to make sure that their entire organization is compliant.
Right.
And that's a heavy lift. It's easier but again, sometimes you gotta figure out what's from a cost perspective as well. What makes sense for the organization.
Yeah. So really take the time on the front end to do that assessment, figure out where your vulnerabilities are and who really is touching it. And
here's the thing, everybody thinks with CMMC and even a portion of NIST that it's all IT. IT needs to figure this out, but man, IT folks typically aren't compliance related. When you think about a SOC or an ISO audit, it's a different animal, it's a different person.
Yeah.
Different mindset.
Right.
And that's why for us, we have an individual that comes in and runs through the entire compliance sector. Do they have a security operations plan? And it revolves a lot around policy. What, where, how, when. By the time that RFP comes in, people sign off. Who has access to it? Where does it go after that? So a lot of it's process oriented. So that's where it comes in from a compliance perspective, making sure you have an individual that can understand that component. After that, then they help put the pieces together to say, okay, here's what you need in order to make sure that you meet the security requirements to continue to do work in this space. And then that's where the high level technical resources come into play.
Sure. That's interesting. So you're going to be part of the Digital Agility Summit, and Stand by Ness is a featured sponsor. I know you guys are going to be talking about CMMC during the conference, but playing off the conference name, how do you define that digital agility that is needed, considering what we've talked about with cybersecurity and everything that's happened over the course of the last year?
Well, when you think about digital and agility, and of course, and again, I'll go back to COVID, everyone had to be agile. If you weren't agile, good luck trying to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, just trying to figure out how to move your business to a different culture, mindset. And when you think about digital, you think about where your information is stored, how is it easily accessible? How's it backed up? How's it restored? But when you think about digital agility, when I hear that, I think to myself, easily accessible at a fast pace. Okay. Mm-hmm. How quickly can I access what in a secure manner to be able to operate at a highly effective level? And a lot of organizations, they're still not there. We talk about, and Todd, these are not all this terminology, we throw out, digital transformation, digital agility, even down to simple MFA, multi-factor authentication from a cybersecurity perspective. Some people in their minds are like, man, that's common sense. Hey, it is, but guess what? A lot of organizations aren't doing it. So if it's so simple, why aren't they doing it? Well, when it really comes down to the nuts and bolts, it's a lot of times it's a decent lift for IT resources to deploy across organizations. So a lot of times it gets pushed on the back burner, and they don't want to outsource it. They don't want to bring somebody else in to assist with it because they figure, hey, we'll get to it at some point. Mm-hmm. But on that digital agility piece of it, my goodness, the comment that I made earlier at the beginning here, with the traction of cloud adoption and utilization of the security components to that, man, we've had clients that we've probably been pressing for the better part of the last 2 to 2.5 years to make the cloud adoption so they can be more agile and streamline from a digital perspective, streamline what they're doing, consolidate certain systems, put processes and controls in place that need to be in place. Again, it all has to come back to better business. You can't just throw IT at something like a lot of people have done historically and still do today. There has to be a methodology behind it to understand how's it going to impact, how's it going to allow us to do better business for our customers. Mm-hmm. All right. And we think about this cloud adoption. We've had clients for the past 2.5 years. We've been trying to get them over off of legacy hardware. And it was like pulling teeth. Man, I'll tell you what, as soon as COVID hits, give it, I think the July to August timeframe, man, I've had people coming out of the woodwork that I've kind of just wrote off a little bit and said, you know what, they're stuck to on-prem, man. They're not making the move because this whole cloud thing scares them. Yeah. They're jumping real quick. We wrote a handful of clients over already onto, whatever you want to call it, whatever environment, cloud environment. But the big one now is Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, Azure WVD. And a big portion of that too, the clients that the businesses need to think about. And again, looking at the trends. Have you ever tried to order hardware lately at the consumer level, a business grade laptop, desktop? Even think about when COVID first hit. Did you ever try to get a webcam?
Yeah, good luck.
Non-existent.
Yeah.
No. And here's the thing. I've been ordering, we provide software, we provide hardware, et cetera, from our distribution channels to our entire client base. And I'm telling you, it is difficult to find the standard laptop grades now, laptop builds. And if you do order the stuff, it's pushed out anywhere between 45 and 60 days, when historically I could have it in the office within 7 to 10 business days.
Yeah.
So as I'm thinking about that, and clients are like frustrated, like, look, we just acquired a company, or we hired 3 people. I need devices. I'm like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I can't get it. You're not going to get it direct from Dell, HP, Lenovo, Microsoft, because they're selling to the large companies like Amazon that go on and throw them online. But it's very difficult to gather or to get the hardware. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how do we overcome that barrier? Because I don't foresee it stopping anytime soon, especially when you think about where a lot of the components made that fall into these machines. It's China.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened historically with some of the taxes, the import-export stuff, the tariffs. So as we think about that, what other scenarios are out there for business to continue to operate at a high level without these hiccups? And it is an Azure WVD environment, or again, something of the like, where in the event that a laptop or computer dies, they just go run down the street or use a Chromebook, buy a $300-$400 Chromebook. As long as they have internet access, all the security, everything lies within that virtualized environment.
Yeah.
But it's just a mindset. It's people, again, the digital transformation piece of this. And it's my job to be able to present that to business owners to help them understand the total cost of ownership. You may not see it now, but I also like to tell that I always use the Ronnie effect. You know, everybody asks, well, what's my ROI? And I say, well, what's your risk of not investing?
Sure. I like that. Yeah.
And we've had organizations that have been dead, they're stuck. And I'm like, look, you don't want to invest. I'm sorry, but I don't know what to tell you. I mean, technology moves at such a rapid pace. You've got to stay on top of it.
Do you think it's more an education component that people just need to be educated on this space, or is it a motivation that they just need the right incentives to make that transition?
It's both. It is going back to some of those clients, we've educated them. We broke it down in to defined numbers from an ownership perspective. And it really took the motivation of something like this darn virus to say, look, they come to say, we can't work.
Right.
Because we can't have people in the office.
It's pretty high motivation to change.
Yeah, high motivation there, which again, this is not motivation that I desire to have going forward by any means.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, how do people find out more about Standby Nest and get a hold of you?
Yeah, and of course, like anything else, I always say Google's your friend. You go out and Google Standby Nest. They can certainly take a look at our website. There's a technologies tab on there. And it'll drop down. I think it even has my mugshot on there, and it takes me to send me a message. But also too, I tell folks, look, the world that we live in, it's a world of information sharing. Mm-hmm. What I know, I'm not the smartest guy out there by any means. And I surround myself with people smarter than I am, which is good. And I always say information sharing is the key to everyone becoming successful. So if there's anyone out there, when they hear this here and they're listening and they say, you know what, I'm not sure about technology. I would like a second opinion, not sure about CMMC or how to set up my network to make sure that we're efficient. What is this whole cloud thing about? Help me understand total cost of ownership, risks involved. Shoot me an email. P. Keeney, P-K-E-E-N-E-Y @standbynest.com. Or feel free to call me direct, 717-870-8609. I'll be more than happy to sit down and have a conversation. I mean, I love those conversations because it gives me a sense of the ability to feel out where they're at in their journey.
Sure.
So then I can use them as not necessarily benchmarks, or metrics, but real world scenarios. Mm-hmm. To say, hey, you know what? This is where other organizations are. Here's where you're at. You're at a good place or you're at a bad place.
Right. Yeah. And as we talked about with the assessments, that's super important to know how you stack up at the start of your journey. So then you can figure out what you need to put in place.
Oh, for sure. And when you think about, you said about the assessments and the journey piece of that, so many organizations are coming to us and saying, hey, you know what? We want to truly understand our risk as it relates to cyber, because right now they have clients asking. So sometimes if you bid on a contract, as part of those contracts, it'll require you to submit some information regarding your cyber liability policies, your professional liability policy, and just an overall snapshot of how are you securing your information and your client's data? Because they don't want to work with someone that's not investing like they are. I don't. Nobody should. If you're not protecting my data like I'm protecting yours and the customer's data, I don't want to do business with you, because I can't. If you're breached, then that can come back on me, and then of course it goes to my client base. Not going to have it.
Yeah.
So a lot of organizations are having us come in and perform. Could be twice a year, annual, biannual security assessments to help leadership, board members, and IT folks understand where their gaps are. And to be honest with you, some of it, the simplest security flaws that we find, misconfigurations, insecure ports, some of it's pretty simple, but guess what? Those are the simple things that are going to get you. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by, insecure ports or misconfigurations, I know a lot of times, folks will open up an outside RDP port or something along those lines, for somebody remote in for something, one thing or another. Maybe they have an outside consultant that helps work on their ERP system or what have you, and they provide them access to perform some hot fixes, patches, updates, whatnot, and they forget to close it.
Right.
That's an opening right there waiting. That's a disaster waiting to happen. So again, those are just some of the things that they have us come in just to catch, keep them honest, I guess, if you will, and on top of things, because hey, I've been in the single entity IT world for many years, and it's so simple to overlook things and become inundated with the day-to-day support requests that may come through. Just make sure that you're doing due diligence in managing cybersecurity. And again, I always say, not only for yourself, but for your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my last question is, what does innovation mean to you?
Always learning, and again, it goes back to the agility side of it. Always creating, always learning, and always moving. You're always innovating. You're always moving forward. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting it here, but there's that kid movie. Oh, my kids used to watch it over and over with the one little boy. He goes back in time, and anyway, I digress. But it's all about innovation.
Yeah.
You fail, you get back up, and you do it again. You think about some of the greats out there. You've got Elon Musk and some of the others that just continue to drive forward. Some of the things that you think are just ridiculous. Just think about it, the stuff with SpaceX and going to space. Right. Now look at it. Right. That's innovation right there. That's moving forward, despite what all the naysayers have to say, and continue to drive forward. I'll tell you an innovative thing here. Just like I mentioned, the opportunity and the trend, the hard trend in cybersecurity when you think about CMMC.
Yeah.
We've had conversations with customers, and they're in the wait and see mode. Like, well, it's a heavy lift, man. It's going to cost us, thousands and thousands of dollars to do this readiness assessment, plus what you guys recommend to implement. Hey, we're going to wait and see. My comment to that is, you're not innovating. You're in the wait and see mode. Somebody else is going to go out there and innovate. They're going to get ahead of you. And they're going to have that certification. They're going to have that CMMC stamp. And guess what? They're going to get the bids. And a lot of those bids that they bid on the DoD space, some of those contracts are could be 2, 3, 5, 10 years.
Right.
Guess what? You're not going to have a shot for a while.
Yeah.
So get out of this wait and see mode. For me, I take risks, but those risks are certainly calculated. It has to make sense. It has to check the boxes. And again, I keep going back to trends. Take a look at those trends. Stanball Nest were part of the anticipatory organization through Dan Burris. And that's one of the things that we focus on. I say that's why we're so at Stanball Nest, we're innovative. Continue to press forward when everybody else is stepping back.
Yeah. Love it. Well, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us here. Really appreciate it.
Hey, love it, man. Anytime. And hey, I look forward to the Digital Agility Summit here in January. It's January already. So shortly,
be here before you know it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thanks so much.
Hey, no problem. Take care.